My guest today, that's guests with an S, are both musicians and both work at Infrared.
Good job.
Thank you. Infrared Studios in Mayflower, Arkansas. Mr. Eric Chesher, for over 25 years, has been producing music for some of the largest recording studios in the industry. His resume includes Capitol Records, RCA, and today he is laying down tracks for himself and other musicians at Infrared Studios. In addition, Eric predictably holds a BA in music performance in both vocal and piano. But confusingly, he also has a BS, a Business of Science degree in pre-med for biology and psychology, and I can't wait to hear how that turn of events happened, and is his mother happy about it? Accompanying Eric Chesher today is Mr. Brian Brown. Born in the most northern region of the United States, Maine, Brian's father loved jazz and feathered his son's skills as a drummer. As early as age 14, Brian began performing, and over his teen years would have the pleasure of learning from and sitting in with such legends as Louie Armstrong, Howard McGee, Benny Golson, and many others. Throughout his career, Brian continued to play with a wide variety of musicians, including Lightning Hopkins, opening for Ramsey Lewis, and more recently performed with Herbie Hancock. Is that true?
Yeah.
Okay. In 1983, Brian moved to Little Rock, Arkansas. Can't wait to hear that story. And today is part of the Ted Ludwig Trio, and like his fellow musician and studio member Eric, helps produce music at Infrared Studios in Mayflower, Arkansas. It is with great pleasure a welcome to the table, not one but two well-trained musicians and Infrared Studio members, pianist Mr. Eric Chesher and drummer Mr. Brian Brown. Welcome, guys.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you.
So I got to tell everybody that, Eric, you were here last week.
Yes, I was.
You came with the Steinway, exclusive Steinway dealer in town, Steinway and Sons, Stephen Wurges. And you are the Steinway and Sons, manager.
Yeah, when Steinway approached Steve to open the store, he quickly realized that I had had my own piano company for years and had been in the business for many, many years. And I think part of receiving the Steinway Gallery was that they knew that he had some pretty good support standing behind him. And I agreed to help. And so he decided he had to call me something. So he calls me the store manager, which I get a kick out of.
And like Stephen, you brought a guest too, fellow musician and drummer, Mr. Brian Brown. So last week, Eric, you and I talked to Stephen a lot, and towards the end, you and I got to talking, and then I found out how interesting you are, and I was like, please come back this week. So I invited you back.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome. And just like Stephen, you brought a friend, another really interesting musician, Brian. Hello, Brian.
Hello. Thanks for having me.
Well, I enjoyed reading about you. You have played with every great person that ever played jazz in the United States and probably outside. But how did you two guys first meet and become friends?
Actually, it was at the Herbie Hancock gig.
That's right.
Oh, so y'all haven't known each other very long?
No,
2008.
Yeah, 2008.
Yeah. And he gave me one of the finest intros I've ever had.
What does that mean? What did you do?
I was the MC for the grand opening.
MC.
And so I got to announce him to come out on stage.
And this was just about the time he and Dr. Rex Bell, who owns Infrared, got together.
Yes.
And like they say, the rest is history. We just kind of, over the years, got to know each other and played. I first played with Dr. Bell back in the 90s, I think. It was, a long time. Then didn't do a lot of work with him, but as things went, then the history of the studio unfolded. I ended up becoming part of the staff. So,
well, I read about Dr. Bell because Stephen, you sent me
He's amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I thought, well, he was called Dr. Bell because he had like a PhD in music or something.
no.
No.
Tell our listeners why he's called Dr. Bell.
He's a pathologist at
that
Baptist
just blows
Hospital.
me away.
He's amazing. That's all I can say.
So when did he start Infrared Studio?
We started officially right in 2007, I guess would be when we officially kicked off. The building that we were in had opened, I think, a little before that. But during that process, I didn't know him, and the person that built that particular building knew me through the piano business. I had helped him with some sales throughout the years, and he called me and said, "You got to come up and see this building that I've built." Little did I know it was a ploy, and I ended up, he is not good in front of cameras and things, and had Herbie Hancock coming in for the weekend, and so I ended up being the MC. And ended up actually staying on board.
Which building did he build?
It was called the Windsong Performing Arts Center. It is no longer in existence.
Was it right there where 430 met?
Yes, right at the
630
junction.
at that huge building that I think now is a church?
Yes, that's where our studio was originally.
I remember when they built that. Was that the recession of 2008 that hit?
Yes, when the banks crashed, the gentleman that had built that building was kind of stuck in a real hard financial place, and so he ended up selling to the Oasis Church. And at that time, I had known Dr. Bell just briefly. He played piano during the first talent search we did to get the studio up and running, and I had no idea that he had actually purchased all the equipment for the studio and really owned it. And he caught me in the hallway one fateful day and said, "Hey, I'd like to keep this going, but we're going to need to move, and I can't do it unless I have some help." And so,
did Dr. Bell build the actual building himself?
No, that was a different man, but he funded and purchased all the equipment for the studio,
and he couldn't afford the rent there anymore, so he was like,
"Well, the building was sold."
Oh, the building was sold.
Yeah, we had to move.
Okay. Mm-hmm. Well, that's an interesting guy, Mr. Bell, Dr. Bell. And to continue on his biography, because he's not here, we can talk about him.
Oh, he's amazing.
He released 2 jazz CDs on the Infrared label. So does the Infrared Studios have a label?
When we first opened, we had a very small label, and that was to help the people that were coming in our studio. We built the studio to give artists in this area a good, safe place to come, to where they didn't...
You always said that. You said that last week, a safe place. I'm like, what does that mean?
Well, what typically happens if you live in a small town and somewhere in the United States, and you are found to have some talent and you want to try to move forward with that, your only options are to go to Nashville, go to New York, go to Chicago, go to LA. You have to physically pick up and leave and go and try and make it. And what we see happen so often is that if you end up having a little success, you end up with people all around you that don't know how to say the word no, or you get taken advantage of. The music business is a brutal.
So it's safe because you can practice your art without feeling like you're going to be taken advantage of.
Yes, you can come here and you can go home at night, and you can still have your family around you, and yet we can provide everything that you would get
but
if you...
But you can't make a good living here, can you?
Yeah.
Well, you are.
Yes, you can. Yeah. Okay. There's so much talent everywhere.
We're going to talk about that. So let's talk about Dr. Bell's local... he released these 2 jazz CDs that have been nationally recognized on NPR's audiophile audition. He's performed music at the Kennedy Center, and he's currently on a project composing new works from the nationally recognized composers for an upcoming jazz piano ensemble and CD. What's he working on now? That was such a vague thing to...
Yeah, I'm not sure where did you read that? That could have been something from the past, I think. I think that project is already finished. Yeah. That's okay.
That's all right.
He's always writing. Rex is probably... and he's probably listening right now, so he's getting mad at me already. But Rex is probably the finest player that I've ever met.
That's what Stephen Wurgis said about you last week.
Well, I'm pretty darn good, and in my travels, I could always hang in there. And then I heard Rex Bell play. He has an extraordinary talent, and combined with that, though, is a real desire to help other artists. And I believe this. He would never say this, but I believe that he started the studio for 2 reasons. 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 2 best production to record his music. He's a phenomenal writer and an arranger of the highest order. And you combine that with his ability to play. But I've seen throughout the years working with him that he also has a great hand that he reaches out to artists. We charge $50 per hour. That's is ridiculous. Cheap. Yeah. And
what does a normal person charge?
If you were in Nashville with a studio with the equipment that we have and the expertise we have, you'd be at $150 to $250 an hour in a blink of an eye.
And you guys love it.
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
So because Dr. Rex Bell is a pathologist and studies human tissues and diagnoses human disease, did he give you all the inside scoop on COVID-19?
Well,
did y'all know it was coming before we did?
No.
No.
All right. This is a great place to take a break. When we come back, we'll continue our conversations with the well-trained musicians from Infrared Studio, pianist Mr. Eric Chesher and drummer Brian Brown. We'll be back after the break.
You're listening to Up in Your Business with Kerry McCoy, a production of flagandbanner.com. Over 40 years ago, with only $400, Kerry founded Arkansas Flag and Banner. During the last 4 decades, the business has grown and changed, along with Kerry's experience and leadership knowledge. In 1995, she launched the business website flagandbanner.com, became an early blogger in 2004, founded the nonprofit Friends of Dreamland Ballroom in 2009, began distributing a biannual publication called Brave Magazine in 2014, and today, she's branched out into this very radio show, YouTube channel, and podcast, where each week you'll hear her engage in candid conversations with engaging persons. Want to know when to fly your flag and when to lower it to half-staff? Sign up for free email notifications at flagandbanner.com. Telling American-made stories, selling American-made flags. Flagandbanner.com. Back to you, Kerry.
You're listening to Up in Your Business with me, Kerry McCoy, and I'm speaking today with pianist Mr. Eric Chesher and drummer Brian Brown, studio members at Infrared Studio in Mayflower, Arkansas, with owner Dr. Rex Bell. Stephen, didn't you tell me you brought some music? Was it Rex's music you brought, or was
I brought a sampling from our studio. The first piece that we'll play is my house band, the fantastic Rex Bell Trio. He wrote pieces about the great women throughout history. And this piece is about Mary Lou Williams, who was, I don't know if she was the first, but she was one of the first African-American women to just dominate the jazz world, started her own record label, worked with Dizzy Gillespie, Monk. She is a powerhouse in the business. She was born in 1910. And died in 1981. So think about the time frame that she did all that in. She's an amazing human.
What's her name?
Mary Lou Williams.
And you're who all plays on this?
You have Rex Bell on the piano.
Okay.
We have Brian Brown on drums and the amazing Joe Vick on the upright bass.
Oh yeah.
And I can't remember if I orchestrated anything in this or not. I don't think so.
Did you play
I think
the piano?
It's computer. No. Rex is the player.
Oh yeah, that's right.
Yes. And I, of course, produced it and recorded it.
Russ, do we have a recording of that we can play?
The Elfrieda Swing should be the first cut.
So how do we know? I love it. It's wonderful.
Yeah.
Yes. So how do we know that it's about Mary? There's no words.
When he released the album, there was a booklet, and he actually did the bios and the backgrounds of all these people.
Are these the type of, I don't know anything about music, I'm sorry, are these the type of chords that she played, or the way she, or the riffs, or how do you say that?
Rex wrote the music for each woman based on his impression of them and what they did throughout their lives, and I'm sure in the case of Mary Lou Williams, this has hints of
Her style.
Her style, yes.
That's really wonderful. I really loved it. Before the break, we talked about Infrared Studio and how y'all met and how you met Brian Brown. But now, Eric, let's talk about how your love of music began. Did your parents play?
My mother was a player. It's odd that I remember her playing 3 songs mostly. She, Dr. Zhivago, Love Theme, was just played every day in my house. And
it's good.
She was such a good player, and she would never talk about it much, about her own playing, and she never forced us to do it, you know. I started playing piano because my older sister started playing, and about 2 years into her lessons, I was maybe 3 or 4 years old, Grandma and Grandpa came to visit, and they found out that Amy, my older sister, was taking piano lessons, and they asked if she would play something. So she did, and of course they clapped. And I said, oh no, I want that. And I took off. I started playing piano when I was 3. And
wow, that's really early.
Yeah.
So you went to, so why did you go to school for a BS to be pre-med? If you knew you loved piano from day one.
Yeah.
And when did you start performing? Did you start performing in high school?
I performed in high school like most typical high school kids was. It wasn't really till I went to college that I really started writing. That was my main thing, writing and playing and singing originals, and started doing concerts and, you know, things. I've always been torn in my life. I'm a man of science. I love it with all my soul, but also music calls me.
So which one did you do? Which one did you plan on doing? Were you going to be a doctor?
Well, it's a funny story. My dad was an orthodontist, and his name is John Emerson Chesher, and I'm Eric John Chesher. So if you look at our initials, I think he had a dream that one day when he retired, he would just walk out to his sign and flip the E and the J around, and I would take over. I worked for him in his office all throughout high school, and already basically could have walked through dental school. He taught me everything, and at the end of my sophomore year, I decided that I was disappointing him enough. I was there on a full ride music scholarship.
Your sophomore
in college. I had gone to college on a full ride scholarship and for music. And I actually decided at the end of my sophomore year that adding the pre-med degree would be a great idea. And I called my dad, and he was so happy.
Aww.
And when I graduated college, one of the first calls I got was from Capitol Records, and so I had a decision to make. I was all set to go get my master's and then move on, and in psych. But New York called, so away I went, and I've never looked back.
I thought it had been your mother that was disappointed. It was your father.
Well, I have 2 memories of my mother. One is I'm about 5 years old, and I'm practicing, and she's standing behind me crying. I was very good at making her cry. Not from the beautiful music either. And she's saying to me, if you would only practice, how good you could be. Move forward to where I'm about 16 years old. I'm still sitting at the same piano practicing, and she's standing behind me, still crying, true story. And she says to me, if this is all you want to do, you should just go to New York now because you're throwing your life away. Because I would do nothing but play music all day long. And she was getting upset.
So first she wants you to practice, then she doesn't want you to practice.
Right.
Yeah. So you went to New York.
Yeah, when I graduated college, the other piece to my life also, when I was in 6th grade, I think, we took a tour of the Baldwin factory that was in my hometown, and I became fascinated on how pianos were made. And I actually asked the guy giving us the tour if I could work there. And being a kind man, he said, oh, sure. Well, he was kidding. But I didn't think he was kidding. So I went home and told my dad that I had a job. And I told him it'd have to be the weekends because I had to go to school. And my dad, of course, said no, he was being nice. But I insisted so much that he drove me down there the next Saturday. And they found this poor guy that had given us the tour. Well, they didn't know what to do with me. So they said, fine. Come on in. And they made me a T-shirt. It said Baldwin Brat on it. And I got
that's
to,
cute.
every weekend I went to the factory and learned how to make pianos and saw the whole process. So also there was a local Baldwin dealer. And
Did they pay you?
No, but the local Baldwin dealer did. He gave me a job at age 12, and I learned how to sell and run a music store from the ground up from this man. His
And
name
how
was
old were you
Mr.
when your
Mihai.
dad started driving you down there?
Oh, I was in maybe 5th or 6th grade or something. I don't know. So I was maybe 11 years old, maybe.
You can't do that now. It's against the
No,
law.
I know.
If you did that now, everybody would be too much responsibility, lawsuit. I can't help somebody that's
Yeah.
ambitious young.
So
You
this
have to
is-
lay around your house and play video games today.
Oh, my gosh, yeah. So this is really the link that ended up with me and Stephen Wirges being, working, me helping him. When I went to New York, I wasn't supposed to start at Capitol Records for about 3 months or so. And I decided, gosh, I've been doing all this work in pianos. Maybe I'll call Steinway because they're here. So I did, and I got to go on Steinway's sales floor and sell Steinways for the first time.
And now how old are you then?
I just graduated college, yeah,
But you went up there to be with...
with Capitol Records. But I had about a 3-month window before I could really start. So
so they would hire you for a lousy little 3 months? I wouldn't hire anybody for 3 months.
I didn't tell them.
Oh, bait and switch.
I think you've given me that advice before, Mom.
What?
Don't tell him you're going to quit in 3 months.
Oh. Shh, Grayson. So let's talk about all the things. You call yourself a producer engineer, but you're also an artist with music, which we've been talking about, with performance degrees. And you've been in the music industry for, I think, at least 25
Long
years.
time.
Yeah. So performance, did you ever perform?
Yes, I did. I got pulled away from it the more I got into the producing side, but it never really left me. I think once you perform, you always perform. Got to work with Richard Marx and some other names, throughout the time. What happened was Capitol Records realized early on that I had a pretty good ear. And back in those days, you could...
What did they hire you for?
I was for the worst job ever. I would sit in a room, me and one other guy who was above me. He was my boss. And back in those days, you were allowed to send, if you were an aspiring writer or a singer, you could just send your music in on tapes. You would just send them in, and someone would actually listen to them. And my job was to sit in this room and open up, and put the tape in and listen. And between me and my boss, we would decide it goes in the round file. Or
So some little kid that just graduated high school is deciding on the music that we're going to listen to?
pretty much.
Wow.
No, I'm kidding. What we had to decide was, in my boss's opinion, because he was sitting there, was the band. Usually what happened was the band we were listening to might be great, but the music they were writing was awful.
What does that mean? The music they're... Oh,
The songs were bad,
Oh,
but
the
the
quality,
band
okay.
was good. Or, the band's really awful, but listen to those songs. If there was any nugget of something that we felt we could do something with, we would pass it up the food chain.
Okay.
And then maybe 1 out of a billion of those they would call down, and I would be sent out to work with them. The worst assignment was in Georgia, working with a band called the Yellow Rose. They were a country band who dressed like the old Bon Jovi with the big hair and spandex. Yeah.
What year was this?
Oh my gosh, I was 23 years old.
That seems like a really good job for a 23-year-old.
It was kind of cool. And when I was in Georgia, then I rehooked up with Yamaha, another great piano maker, and I helped all the local dealers there in my spare time with MIDI and keyboards and training their salespeople.
If a kid goes to college right now
Yeah.
for music performance, is there somebody going to call them and ask them to come do this same job, or does that job
No.
even exist? Oh, no.
No.
How does it work today? Look, Brian's shaking his head. No.
Yeah, it's much different today. You have to be solicited today.
What does that mean?
Well, because of the internet, mostly, but it was before that. But now with the internet, labels don't want to actually develop you as an artist. They want you to already have a fan base, already have an internet presence, already be selling. They just want to kind of join in the party that you've already created. Hence the need for studios like us. We do all of that.
That's what the word safe means that you keep talking about, a safe place.
Yeah.
Brian, I'm fixing to get to you.
Oh, no problem.
And she will.
I will. You're
I've
next.
sat in that seat.
Yeah, you're next. All right. Let's go ahead and take a break right here. Although I do want to ask you, how long do you have to practice piano to be good? And do you practice still all the time now?
I do. I practiced when I was young 4 to 6 hours a day, but that's not normal. Your average
Yeah, that's not normal.
child probably plays an hour a day.
If you can get them to.
If you can get them to. But if you want to...
What's the trick to practicing?
Practicing well. You should practice like you perform. There shouldn't be a difference. That's just
What about making a mistake when you practice?
So what?
Do you keep making the same mistake, or do you...
No.
How do you get through that mistake?
You recognize your mistake, you go back and you fix it, and then you practice it fixed. There's a problem, no matter what it is, sports, like a golf swing. If you learn the wrong golf swing and practice it for 24 hours a day, you will have mastered a wrong golf swing.
So if you keep playing this piece and it get to the same spot every time and you mess it up, don't start all the way at the beginning again. Fix it right there, really slow down, fix it. Get the memory muscle. Is that what you're trying to do?
Muscle memory, exactly.
Muscle memory.
Yes,
Okay.
and brain memory.
And brain memory. So do it really slow over and over to get through it. All right. Let's take another break. This is a great place. When we come back, we're going to continue our conversation with the well-trained musicians from Infrared Studio, pianist Mr. Eric Chesher, who's been talking to us. And next, we're going to find out about the drummer, Brian Brown. He's going to be in the hot seat next. I want to remind everyone we're broadcasting live every Wednesday from 6 to 7 p.m. Central Time on 101.1 The Answer and Up in Your Business with Kerry McCoy's Facebook page. Also on Fridays, the show is rebroadcasted on KABF 88.3 FM at 2 p.m. and a podcast is made available on all popular listening sites and YouTube channels. And if you have a question for our musicians, stay tuned. The hotline number when we come back. Do you have the hotline number?
I do. I wrote it on your script for you.
You did? You want me to put it in there?
You already did.
I'll be damned.
I can't believe you didn't notice. I thought you copy and pasted on purpose.
You should. Oh, I've got the best kid playing on my porch in 2 weeks. I'm going to send y'all something to come see. I have to send y'all his video.
Absolutely. I'd love to see it.
If y'all go out. Y'all may not go out, but it's early. You're listening to Up in Your Business with me, Kerry McCoy, and I'm speaking today with pianist Mr. Eric Chesher and drummer Brian Brown, studio members of Infrared Studios in Mayflower, Arkansas, way out there in the boonies. I don't know why they're out there, but they like Mayflower, Arkansas. It's right off the freeway, easy access, very centrally located in Arkansas. That way everybody can come see them. If you have a question or a comment during our show today for either of these musicians, you may call.
The number is 501-823-0965.
Give it again, Gray.
The number is 501-823-0965.
All right, Brian, you're in the hot seat now.
All right.
You're a drummer. Why drums?
That's a great question. I think
Well, thank you.
a lot of it had to do with just nervous energy at first. I remember sitting at the dinner table and driving my parents absolutely crazy.
That was so fast. I don't know how you did that. Okay, that's fast.
Yeah. And finally, around the time I think I was in 6th grade, one of the local, you have to understand, Maine is, if I was any more Yankee, I'd be Canadian.
Yep.
But it's way up there, and the little town that I grew up in had about 5,000 people. But it was called the City of Belfast because it was a county seat. But anyway, the local Bangor, Maine, which was 47 miles away, had a lend-lease type program for all the school districts in about 100-mile radius. And so my dad rented a snare drum for me, which was one of the big old wooden hooped Gretsch snare drums. 14.
Isn't that what they carry when they march?
Yeah, okay. Yeah. But this is back in the 50s, early 50s, and the newer drums that you'll see today all have braces on them, so they're kept at a very level angle, and there's no problem hitting them.
Uh-huh.
Back then, it was a strap that went around your shoulder,
Yeah.
And
Little drummer boy.
Yeah, and it would move with your hip as you march. So you had, yeah. Well, after I have several Charlie horses and bruises to prove after that, but it kind of progressed from there. My dad was a jazz fanatic.
So what did that have to do with the county seat and all of that?
Oh, just
where you came from.
Yes, yeah. It was a town of like 5,000.
I just thought maybe it was so big and open you could have a drums and nobody could hear you because there was so much open air.
Well, that too.
It's like, you live in this really big open air, so let's just get him drums and he can just go crazy.
No, the fact that my dad was such a big jazz fan.
Did he play?
No, he was a veterinarian, allergic to animals, believe it or not.
That is the oddest thing I think I've ever heard on the show.
I'm sorry to laugh. But
yeah. Oh, yeah. He found out in his 6th year at Cornell that he was starting to react to hay chaff and hair dander off of animals. And,
he developed it.
Well, yeah, and he went to a couple of specialists, and they told him, they said, well, you could, graduate and go into practice, but you'll be out in 2 years. Well, he was in practice for 27 years.
What did he do? Just take a lot of Benadryl?
Yeah. Unfortunately, he had to take literally handfuls of ephedrine and Benadryl and all these real
that'll make you clean the house.
Yeah. And cancer finally took him out at 50. He was real young. But anyway, he kind of pushed me along the course of playing music. And as a result, I got exposed to some of the real heavyweights of the music business. And that at the age of 14 or 15, playing with people like Louie Armstrong and Howard McGee and some of the upper echelon of players.
Did you actually play with them or play along with their records in your house?
No, I played with them.
Played with them.
At 14?
Yeah. Louie Armstrong was an interesting story. There is in southern Maine, there's it used to be this big opera house kind of set up at a place called Old Orchard Beach. It was on the end of this huge pier that was out in the Atlantic Ocean, and they would bring in, especially during the summertime, which is a big tourist time for Maine. God knows what they're going to do this year, but they would bring in big bands, Glenn Miller, Benny Goodman, all these huge bands, and we had gotten to know one of the promoters, and he was bringing in Louie Armstrong, and was a personal friend of Louis's, and introduced me, and Louie, God bless him, called me up in the middle of the concert to play.
No way.
Yeah. And I mean, being that age, 14, I really didn't understand what was happening. My dad was out in the audience having a heart attack. And it was only years later, if you want to know what if you're not familiar with Louie Armstrong and what he brought to the table, I suggest watching the Ken Burns series on jazz.
Yeah.
Because for a non-jazzer, if you will, that's a perfect primer of the whole kind of history of jazz. But Louie was, heads and shoulders above just about everybody else as far as what he brought and the innovations.
You remember what song you played along with?
C-Jam Blues.
Amazing.
It's an old jazz standard. He was.
You must have been pretty good for all these guys.
He was a sweet man.
So you played with Louie Armstrong. For people who don't know, he's a trumpeter.
Mm-hmm.
Wouldn't that know what you would call him? Howard McGee. I looked him up because you said you played with him. He's a trumpeter.
Yeah.
Charlie Mariano.
Yeah, he played clarinet.
Saxophonist. And Benny Golson, another saxophonist. So you've got all this repertoire with all these horn players.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So so when I watched their songs that they played because I was looking for you because I just met you today and I was wondering what you look like. So I was looking for pictures for you, and I was looking through and I was watching their songs on YouTube, and it looked like all these drummers were playing with brushes.
Mm-hmm.
Is that what you play with?
Yeah, it's sometimes, but especially this gig that I've been with Ted Ludwig at the Capitol Hotel now for 12 years. Most of that is brushes simply due to the fact of the acoustics in hotel and just volume level. But yeah, brushes it's a whole other, they make me cry every day because as opposed to a stick, which you're basically managing physical bounce, a brush is you create each stroke. There's no bounce. So
carpal tunnel.
Oh well, I have nightmares.
Yes, ma'am.
I have nightmares about that. But luckily, knock on wood, I haven't developed that.
Playing brushes looks easier, but it's actually harder because you don't get the bounce.
Oh, it's a whole other thing. Yeah. It brings because if you look at a drum, okay, just arbitrarily, there are different colors on that drum going out from the rim to the center of the drum. It's just different colors to it.
And when you say colors, you don't mean literal colors. You mean sound colors. You taught us about that last week. Yeah. The colors of sound.
Yes.
I learned.
But and brushes are just another color, basically. And there's all sorts of variations to the colors you can play as opposed to a stick.
You played with Lightning Hopkins.
Yeah, for a week.
Oh.
For a week in Boulder, Colorado, at a club there called Tulagi, which was this big college hangout. And they brought in all the national acts of the day, if you will.
Rolling Stones magazine ranked him as on number 71 on the 100 greatest guitarists of all times.
He was interesting to work with because if you listen to a modern blues piece, and it's a 1-4-5, and it's at 8 bars, you're going to the 4,
right,
and then at another 8 bars you go to the 5. Well, his chord progressions would happen at bar 13 and a half or whatever. I mean, you had to really listen. He taught me a lot about listening to where the music was going. And just a sweet man, sweet guy. He and his wife traveled together. And on break, would do a set, take a little break, and say, "Mama, give me my medicine." And she carried a pint of old Overholt or whatever. And
what was it? Old what?
Whiskey.
Yeah. Old over.
Yeah, just
Overholt.
Overhauls.
I don't know that one. Okay.
Just
cheap.
Well, not necessarily, but just that was his
medicine.
That was his medicine. And yeah, that was a fun week. I took me a month to recover from that because I was trying to stay up with him.
And he was probably 20 years older than you.
Oh, at least. I was 23, 24. He had to be in his 60s.
The life of a traveling musician is so tough.
It is. That's a young man's game as far as I'm concerned.
But there's so many people still doing it that are old.
Yeah, but they're staying in 4-star hotels, not sleeping in the back of a pickup.
Oh, there you go. There you go. It's still hard, though. Even still, that's even star. So you played in this band, this fusion band, and I was like, what is a fusion band? So I went and looked at Weather Report.
Yes.
They opened for Ramsey Lewis, and they had a hit called Birdland, which became a jazz standard, which I went and listened to. I was like, I know that song. Were you playing with them at the time that was a hit?
I played, this was a band called Fly and the Zippers. And it also
They were stoned when they made that name up.
Fly was this great saxophone player, bass clarinet player.
Oh, okay.
With you have to kind of close your eyes and picture this. He had instead of a full beard, he had a cone of hair growing out from his right jawline. It was like about a foot long, 18 inches long at its peak, and it would flutter when he played because he was,
Because he played the horns.
Yeah, he played bass clarinet, tenor, and alto, flute.
So he kept everything shaved, but right there
But this one little cone of hair
on the right side.
On the right side, it came out like this. Women loved it for some reason.
I don't get that, but okay.
Anyway, he would perform with a Snoopy flight helmet on with goggles and a throat mic he would sing the octaves of whatever note he was playing. So, I mean, it was bizarre. But
he's multi-talented, though.
Yeah. Anyway, it was a...
So he would play a clarinet, you said. Is that right? Did you say clarinet?
Bass clarinet.
And sing with the throat mic on his... Yeah. How do you do that?
He's humming.
Hum it while you're playing.
Yeah.
Well, the air's coming through, so you can engage your...
Yeah.
Excuse me, I'm leaning back.
Yeah, you are. You're just way too comfortable in here.
And you can engage your vocal cords, but the trick is to produce enough air to keep the reed that he has to vibrate to make the sound in his horn.
Yeah.
And stay on pitch.
Yeah.
So it's an extraordinarily weird thing.
Or good. I mean, talented.
I love it.
Love it. Okay, what's his name? We got to look him up.
His real name was Phil McClard.
But when we Google it, when we want to go to YouTube and look him up, what's his name?
Fly McClard.
Fly McClard. Honey, Gray, put a link to that on there.
Absolutely. Fly in the zippers, right?
Yeah, Fly in the zippers.
Fly in the zippers, you might get something, but that was back in the 70s. I mean,
I got to go see this sideways beard.
Say that the internet
It's 18
is a strange
inches
place.
long.
The cone of shame coming out of his cheek. Strange.
The women loved it. I don't think
The
it was
women loved
shame. It was a sexy
wow,
cone.
it's
well,
All right, go ahead, Brian. You're losing us.
Boulder was home to some of the more original. I look at band names these days, and the stuff coming out of Boulder. I was also in a band, this big 10-piece horn band, that we played everything from Bob Wills to Duke Ellington. And we were speaking of the road, we were on the road a lot. And the just the the amount of energy. Fly ended up in that band as well. We both kind of went to that band because they gave us an offer we couldn't refuse, which is really good money. And we actually did a recording for Columbia, and hearkening back to what we were talking about before. I mean, they gave us $50,000 to do a record.
Whoa, that's big bucks.
Well, but that was kind of if they were interested in you and they wanted to develop you, that's what they'd do.
Okay.
And they'd take that back. They considered it a loan.
Yes, it was a loan.
Oh, yeah. Never mind.
Of course, we were, buying cases of tequila and really great marijuana and putting it on a rental slip. So, along with recording. So, just to be totally honest here, it was the 70s after all.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. That's fun.
Yeah.
Cool.
But, that had
I forgot where we were going. I don't even know where I am in the show. I'm going to take a break, and we're going to come back. We got 5 minutes. I want to come back. I love talking to Brian Brown. He's got stories. Okay, you may have to come back next week. Every week I get another guy to come back because I just can't quit talking to him. All right, let's take a quick break. When we come back, we'll continue our conversation with these two interesting musicians telling their stories from Infrared Studio, pianist Mr. Eric Chesher and drummer Brian Brown. We'll be right back. Short.
It's the time of year to splash your home with as much red, white, and blue.
Say?
Hope that wasn't too off the wall.
No! Love it. It's true. My kids hear stories all the time. They're like, what? I'm like, you can't shock me, child. There's no shocking me. Here we go. Oh, no.
Almost.
American flag flying high. Five seconds. Your business with me, Kerry McCoy, and I'm speaking today with pianist Mr. Eric Chesher and drummer Brian Brown, studio members from Infrared Studios in Mayflower, Arkansas. If you're just tuning in and you missed what we've been talking about, what we've been laying down, I'm sorry, because you need to go back and listen to this podcast or tune in. I was going to say on Friday to KABF, but the podcast is always available. So, Brian, how did you end up moving? Well, actually, you're going to have to come back because we're almost out of time. But real quickly, how did you end up moving in 1983 to Little Rock, Arkansas?
I moved here to get out of the sandbox of Boulder. I'm a recovering alcoholic.
Oh, see, I told you I love them.
Yeah. And
love those guys.
Anyway, came down to help a friend of mine build a solar house and get out of that sandbox. Mm-hmm. And he was also recovering. He had about 5 years in AA and so forth, and kind of was my quasi sponsor. Mm-hmm. So did that and didn't touch a drumstick for, I don't know, 7 months or so. Moved here in March of '83, and by September I had a job with Art Porter. After sitting in with his group one night, he offered me a gig, so I've been playing ever since then. Mm-hmm. This is the longest, this COVID thing, man. This is the longest break I've had in ever.
Ever.
Yeah, and I mean, I practice every day, and luckily we are recording.
Yeah, let's talk about that. Y'all have been in the industry a long time. You've seen a lot of changes. Looking back, do you have any advice for any young musicians? The business is so different today.
Oh, it's totally different.
How do young musicians get started? Should they go get a degree? Did you get a degree, Brian?
No, I did not.
But you play with all these men who are trained musicians.
Luckily, you don't have to show any credentials other than what you bring to the table, what you can play.
Is it worth getting a degree? Should you go to college?
I'm a fan of it, but it is not a necessity. No one cares if you have a piece of paper when you're playing for them. It's what you can do and what they think you might be able to do. I think that a college degree opens doors on the different sides of the music business, not just the performing end, that possibly you wouldn't get if you didn't have it. So I'm a huge fan of college.
And I think you need to read music. Do you read music, Brian?
Gotta read music.
Gotta read music. So
music.
if you have to get some training. You've got to be able to, if you don't, yeah. So what's Infrared Studios' goal? What is their goal for the future?
Our goal is to keep helping as many people as we can develop their talent. That's what we do.
Is that what you want your legacy to be?
It seems to be the legacy, and of course the great music from the great players that are there already, and really developing the new and young or old talent that comes through our door. We give them 400% effort.
We're going to play. You brought some more music. We've run out of time. Yeah. We're going to go ahead and put it on the podcast. So we'll play your next song. What is that music?
The next song was a movie score that I just finished. It's The Battle Scene. It's a movie that's coming out based on the Netflix show The Last Kingdom, and the score was accepted. I can announce that, and so I brought The Battle Scene, and this is a full symphonic movie score. A big difference from the first song.
And what's the name of it?
It's just called The Battle Scene.
And what's the name of your Netflix show?
The Netflix show is called The Last Kingdom, and they're making a movie out of that show.
That's so cool. We know you. I want to take this opportunity to tell our listeners thank you for spending time with us. Thank you, Brian. Thank you, Eric.
Thanks for having us.
I loved being with you guys. We hope that our listeners have learned or heard something today that's been inspiring or enlightening, and that whatever it is, will help you up your business, your independence, or your life. I'm Kerry McCoy, and I'll see you next time on Up in Your Business. Until then, be brave and keep it up.
You've been listening to Up in Your Business with Kerry McCoy. For links to resources you heard discussed on today's show, go to flagandbanner.com, select radio, and choose today's guest. If you'd like to sponsor this show or any show, contact me, Gray, at flagandbanner.com. All interviews are recorded and posted the following week. Stay informed of exciting upcoming guests by subscribing to our YouTube channel or podcasts, wherever you like to listen. Kerry's goal is simple: to help you live the American dream.
If you liked this video, subscribe to our YouTube channel by clicking on the picture of Kerry's face in the center of the screen. For more of Kerry's interviews, click either video on the right of the screen. And as always, thank you for watching.